evening. My name is Rose Blaize, and this is the live book show where we have authors come on board to talk about the books, to talk about the messages that they want to convey within the books. So welcome, welcome everybody, welcome this evening. On my left, I'd like to welcome my guest panellist, Omowale. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Rose.
Welcome, it's good to have you here. Now, for my esteemed guest, Khadijah Ward, author of Blacksterling. Good evening, Khadijah.
Good evening, Rose, and to the viewers, thank you for having me here.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful having you here, Khadijah. As usual, we're going to kickstart the show by me asking you just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my parents are from Barbados, and I have like 6 siblings.
Okay.
We grew up in Highbury in a 1-bedroom house, and things were very, very difficult for us. I mean, like they were for, you know, most people that came from the Caribbean. And I did have a very kind of like a very hard life, struggled like everybody else within, you know, the white supremacist system. It was very, very difficult. But now I'm actually an author of many books, of Black empowerment books. Thank you so much, for children and adults alike. And my focus now at this time in my life is to empower the Black community to achieve Black liberation and self-reliance and collective wealth.
Thank you for that. That was a wonderful introduction. Okay, so now if I ask you to just tell us a little bit about the book, Blacksterling. Give us an overview of the book.
Blacksterling really is a book, again, for people to create unity, for the Black community to create unity, self-reliance and collective Black wealth. And what Blacksterling talks about, first of all, it deconstructs the white supremacist system, the white terrorist system, as I like to call it. So it talks about the system and how we are controlled under that system. So it talks a little about that so people understand where they are within this society. And then it talks about when we were rich, when we ruled in life, and then it talks about how we should work in unity, again, to be liberated, and how we should remove ourselves from the system and from the corporate plantation to achieve self-reliance and to govern ourselves, and again to achieve collective wealth, what we had in the past. It also has 7 steps within the book as well. There's 7, what I call 7 inspirational steps that it has in the book, so that people can find it easy to implement the content of the book. In terms of unity, working together to achieve collective wealth and liberation.
Yes, and I found that I really enjoyed the steps actually, because I saw it as a toolbox of sorts, ways in which we can then begin to implement and strategize how to implement, as you say, self-sufficiency. So that was really great. I know that you wanted to talk to us a little bit about the introduction. Would you like to read a little bit of that to us? There was something in the introduction that you wanted to share.
Yeah, on the first page of Blacksterling, I just thought I wanted something that would really capture people, that would capture the audience. So what I did was I wrote, if law was passed tomorrow that stated we are no longer housing Black people on our council estates, we are no longer allowing people, Black people, to work on our corporate plantations, we are no longer allowing Black people to shop in our supermarkets, how would you survive? And so I was asking people that question so that they can stop and think about, what would you really do if the system that controls you then took away that control but switched the control to something else? What would you do? You know, look at where you are now, try to put yourself in a situation where you can have your own power, so that you don't have to abide by the laws that we are under at the moment. So that was quite impactful, and it turned out to be a prophecy, to be honest, in terms of like the COVID-19, where we were told that we couldn't actually go to the supermarket. Well, we could go, but we had to queue up. So again, it's that instruction, it's that control. And we as a people, we were under that control because we didn't have any kind of organisation, any kind of infrastructure of our own. So we had to abide by these laws. But for me in Blacksterling, I wanted people to think about, what would you do if they told you that you couldn't do this? The very people that are controlling you, if they said they won't house you, if they said you can't bank with them, if they said you can't buy their food, how would you survive?
It shows how dependent we are. This is the thing. It shows how dependent we are, and it's really, really important that people actually take a step back and think about that question.
Yeah.
And then begin to look at ways in which we can develop different forms of self-sufficiency in different areas of our lives. Okay, so that basically answers the first step, isn't it? Basically answers in terms of imagining what that would be like, and then networking with those of like mind on a path of unity and collective organisation. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more, or whether ideally you've answered the question in terms of posing it to our audience. Okay, so I'm not sure whether you now want to talk about the next step, the second step, or whether you choose to elaborate a little bit more, because what I see here is that you speak about the corporate plantation. So I don't know if you want to speak to us a little bit about the corporate plantation, because that's ideally what we're living in now, isn't it? You know, when you talk about, you know, where we are now and the systems that we adhere to now, the corporate plantation, please speak to us about that.
Well, the first chapter of Blacksterling is who controls the system that controls you.
Right.
So it talks about the systems that we're under, and the corporate plantation is just one part of that system.
Right.
So the corporate plantation is the 9-to-5 job that we're all trained, to aspire to.
Absolutely.
Even when we're very young. I mean, I was told to go and study, you know, go to university and go and get a job. So we're told to go to work for somebody. We're not told to be entrepreneurs, to try to build for ourselves. We are taught to go to work for somebody else, and that's all a part of the system. So I talk about the system, a lot about the system, the prison system, you know, and the corporate plantation is just one part of the system. But that is one of the parts of the system that keeps us under control. Because under this system, we have our wage, so we get paid every month, and we live according to that wage, don't we? We live on that wage. So every month we look forward to having this wage. We don't do it. We have our credit cards, and you know, we live within those means. But we don't really have anything above that. So we have to keep going back to the corporate plantation in order to get this wage. In
order to live,
and that is how we are kept within the system. We keep the system going by working within it on the corporate plantation.
Keeping it occupied.
We keep it occupied. We feed it. We fuel it. And so we keep it going. And before we know it, we're 65, 70, and our life's over. That's it. We haven't done anything. So we talk. So it talks about the corporate plantation, and it talks about how we should try to escape from the corporate plantation. And I talk about how I escaped from the corporate plantation as well. But it's the whole system, looking at how the system controls us, and it's about really thinking, using your intellect and analysing the system. We have to stop and think what we're doing instead of going through day to day. Without thinking, just going through and acting, we have to think about what we are doing. Who is controlling us? Why are we doing this? What's the aim of this? What's going to be the end game of this? And when we stop and think and start thinking about it, that's when we will act and start to progress towards, you know, liberation and collective wealth. But we have to understand that we're in a matrix. We have to understand that we're in a control system first. And that's why the first chapter is who controls the system that controls you, and it talks about corporate plantation, white terrorism, and all of those things, the whole structure.
That's right. And then again, we have our parents as examples. You get to 65, and then what? Do you know what I mean? So you then go on.
Can I just ask very quickly? I mean, you have talked about the corporate element, and you've given a description of the corporate element. Could you briefly give a description of the other parts of that control system?
The other parts that I talk about are, let me talk about, for example, maybe the music industry is another part of control. The music industry is something that they understand, the people that control us, the white terrorist system that control us, they understand that what music does for you. Music really generates feelings, good feelings. So, and that in turn generates money. They understand about that system. Yeah. So again, it's about controlling us through another aspect of a system.
That's right.
So the music industry is a system of control.
Yes.
Yeah. So they have all of our musicians, and they're the ones that help them create. Well, we create the music, but we have to do it according to their standards. So we have to say what they want us to say.
Yes.
And again, in the lyrics of the music, that's how they control us through the lyrics. So they make us act, because music is so powerful. It can make you act and do certain things, yeah?
Absolutely.
Positive or negative, yeah? And so the way the music industry works is it makes it work on a negative. It makes us hate ourselves, and it makes us feel that we are not worthy. So we act out, particularly the younger generation.
And hip-hop.
We act out, hip-hop, I've got it in there, hip-hop, a state of hypnosis. So I talk about that as us being in hypnosis in terms of hip-hop and music.
Yeah.
But again, it's another form of control, where they control our minds, so we act in a certain way, and they keep us captivated within this system. So all we want to do, we want to buy the music. We want to just have the fast cars. We want to have all the gold chains.
Yes.
So it's an empty form of it's empty life, and it doesn't take you anywhere. But again, it's a control system, and people don't understand that is a control system.
Now you speak about that. You then actually went on to say, if you don't follow the status quo, you speak about from the cradle to the jail.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. So if you're not following the system, it's then what happens. So speak to us about from the cradle to the jail that you speak about.
The cradle to the jail, again, is what the brothers asked me about systems. So again, it's systems, the whole infrastructure of the system. So the cradle to the jail talks about how our men, as boys, they come in from the cradle and then they go to the jail, because it's a complete system to put them into jail. Again, it's a corporate entity. The prison system is a corporate entity.
Yes.
So what they do is they put us in that system so that it breaks up the family. Again, breaking up the black family is another form of destruction of the system. So they get our men into the system of jail.
Yes.
So once they get into the jail, so they make it difficult for us, for example.
Yes,
So we're in ghettos.
families.
Yeah, we're in ghettos. We have one-parent families.
Don't
So
have the representation of the male in the home.
it's inevitable that a large majority will end up in the prison system, and then within that prison system, then you become a commodity within that prison system, and it makes money for a lot of white corporations. So when you think about who supplies the shirts, who supplies the footwear, who supplies the food, who supplies all the things, who supplies all of those things. So all of these corporations are receiving monies and growing bigger into big industries from on the black man of the Africa.
That's right.
Yeah. So again, it's from the cradle to the jail, and that's what I talk about. We go from the cradle, we go to the school, and then we go to the jail.
Right, so thank you for explaining that, because you say, from school, if we're not cut off from the economic chain at school because you've been excluded, we talk about the employment figures. For example, the national statistics in 2012 talk about, UK's unemployed figures between 16 to 24 is a 50% rise in the long-term unemployed for the same group by 2015. And that, again, is a reflection of us, in a sense, failing. And, how and why that happens is
we're set up to fail, aren't we? We're set up to fail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, which is what you go on to explain. And then we talk about step 2, which is about looking at solutions. So providing life skills, manhood ceremonies, mentoring programs, and potential leaders. So could you elaborate on step 2 for us, please?
Well, again, it's step 2's talking about, if I can remember, I haven't even read my own book for such a long time. But
I know that feeling.
Step 2, I think it may be gearing towards unity. So it's about working with other people, like-minded people like you and other organisations that can help us elevate ourselves. So again, I spoke about Manhood Academy Global. That's an organisation that deals with young boys, and it does the rites of passage to Gambia. So working with them, and it works with parents as well. So working with them, and there's a few other organisations that I mention. But again, it's about collaborative working. so that we can have mentoring.
Right.
Yeah, because
Right.
we do need mentoring. We do need to work together to build. We do need to buy each other's products and services,
Yes.
so that we can build our businesses into large industries. Because we can't grow if people don't buy our products or buy our
Right.
services. So again, that's about collaboration, working together.
And then that leads us very nicely into step 3, where you speak about the entrepreneur. So if you can just elaborate about that, you know, working black-owned businesses, companies that you speak of, because you speak very much about getting to that place of self-sufficiency. So just speak to us about what the black entrepreneur looks like, that state of self-sufficiency.
Well, first of all, I think I'd like to talk about, just briefly, about myself in the corporate plantation.
Right,
yeah?
okay.
As because I was, like anybody else, encouraged to go to, you know, get a good job, you know,
Yes.
go and study, get a good job,
That's
which
right.
I did. I had
Yes.
many good jobs. I was in the corporate plantation. I experienced racism. I had to fight people. I had to, you know, take people to court. And then in the end, I just thought, you know, I can't take this anymore. I need to be working for myself.
Yes.
Because you're actually making other people rich. You're making these people rich. And what do you have? You just have your wage. That's all you have. And if I use my sister as an example, my younger sister, I write about her in the book, that she worked in a bank. That was her very first job.
Right.
And from that very first job, she said, I can't do this. So she said, what can I do that can give me freedom, economic freedom? How can I be an entrepreneur and work for myself? So she decided to, you know, go into business for herself, which she did. So, I mean, a black entrepreneur is someone that, for me, is someone that has courage to remove themselves from a system. You have to have courage to do it, because it's easy to depend upon this system because it gives you that sense of security in a way.
Yeah.
So you don't want to leave it, but you have to have courage to say, I need to go out on my own and I need to do this. Yeah, I need to try to build for myself or build for my community. Yeah. So the entrepreneur will be someone that's brave, someone that's very brave, that believes that they can go out and, you know, and they can work on their own. And then once you're an entrepreneur, then you have to start working with other people, trying to collaborate, but also trying to, you know, get people to buy your products or your services, whichever one that you're offering.
It's building that business.
It's building the business, so it's understanding. We have to understand about business. So it's understanding about, you know, the marketing and all the aspects of business. We have to understand that.
Right.
Yeah. So we have to understand what does it take to build a business. But at the end of the day, you do need customers. So we need people to buy into our products and our services.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's all. So yeah. So an entrepreneur, in the first instance, I would say, is someone that's brave. They take that step towards independence.
Which is good. And one of the undercurrents that you spoke about as well was about that self-hatred. You know, that this system that we're in perpetuates self-hatred, which again takes us a far cry away from wanting to rise and be that independent person. If your mindset isn't there, then it's not going to happen, which leads us on to chapter 4, where you actually state, once upon a time we were rich.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about the still in change. Just quickly, briefly. I mean, the system is so sophisticated. It does make us hate ourselves, and that's why we don't do for self, because we don't believe in ourselves. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's that part. Excuse me. So
It's all right.
I talk about once upon a time we were rich, because people have to understand that we were rich.
Where are we coming
We didn't
from?
start from slavery. You'd be surprised how many people believe that we started off as slaves, and that's the beginning of our
Ignorance for
yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember being in school. I was only about 12 or 11 at the time, and I first heard about slavery because my parents didn't tell me about slavery.
you. No.
I first heard about slavery in school,
Yes.
and I was so shocked when I saw images. It's just I couldn't believe that this is what I came from. You know, I didn't know anywhere else. I didn't know we were rich. I didn't know anything. All I knew about was the Caribbean. I didn't know anything else. So some people, even today, they believe that we just came from slavery, but we were rich. And to me, it's about believing, understanding that we came from richness. We ruled, yeah? We ruled and we were rich. So we have to understand that. And once you believe that, once you know that you come from that, you come from greatness, then you start to believe. If you believe that you was just a slave, and that's all you were.
But Khadijah, if this is what the curriculum teaches us in British schools, if that's what the curriculum teaches us, that's what we understand to be real.
Well, that's why I talk about we should be educating our own children. We shouldn't be in schools. We shouldn't be in mainstream schools. There's many ways. There's so many schools that you can teach your children online. We can create things on schooling online. There are a few schools that I do know about, and a few different people that are trying to do.
And we can log it on the end of the
program.
program.
And there's homeschooling, and there's a good colleague of mine, Kay Johnston, that's built her own school. She had a big fight with the Department of Education, but in the end she built her own school. But so she can show people as well how to actually legally remove your child from the mainstream system, and then you can either homeschool or create your own schools. So we should be educating our own children. It makes no sense whatsoever to allow the enemy, I'm sorry, I have to say the enemy, to be educating your children. It's foolhardy. I can't even understand why we're allowing it.
I remember coming to your book launch many years ago. It was a wonderful book launch.
Thank you.
There you actually spoke of this story of this lady who wanted to open a school to teach our children about their history. And in the book you then go on to talk about Blacknificent, which I thought was a wonderful title, where you begin to talk about the heroes and the sheroes, so that we can give our children that sense of, well-being, that sense of ownership, pride, and everything else.
We need to understand that we were leaders, and that we've done great things in society, and we started the civilization. We have to understand that, and then we have something to aspire to. Our children have something to aspire to. We have our own superheroes. We don't need the superheroes that are presented to us. We have our own, and we have to promote those to our people, to our younger people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then,
can you perhaps just give us an indication of one or two of the superheroes that perhaps existed before the enslavement?
Well, when I was talking about, because I'm talking about economics in Blacksterling, then I talk about people that have done things like economically to promote. So I talk about Marcus Garvey, and I talk about Malcolm X as well, because he was into, self-sufficiency, self-reliance. So Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X. I've got the Blacknificent 8, so I name 8 people. I can't even remember the 8 people that I name, but I name 8 people. But they're 2 of the people that I promote, because they are people that understood that we need to be doing for self. And not only did they understand it, they actually practically did something about it. So for me, it's showing these are heroes. Against all odds, these people, they did something to make change, positive change for our people.
Yes, Marcus.
Are there any examples of women who did equivalent things? You mentioned Marcus Garvey. You mentioned Malcolm X. Are there
I mentioned also Queen Nzinga. I mentioned Queen Nzinga in my book. I mentioned her again in my newer book as well, and also in Dark Girl Boss I mentioned her as well. In fact, in my other book I talk about that after. I mentioned a lot of women in that book. But I mentioned her because she actually fought on the battlefield to prevent the slave hunter, the Portuguese. So I mentioned her as well as a hero, as a shero. Someone that fought on the battlefield as well. So I do mention women, of course,
Harriet
as
Tubman,
well.
You mentioned as well.
Harriet Tubman. I mentioned quite
a few.
Yeah, I mentioned quite a few different. There's 8 people that I mentioned. That I mentioned.
And what's lovely about that is you then kind of swiftly went on to look at, how to strategize bringing people together. All of these, us having these sheroes and heroes as examples. You then went on to talk about, now that we have that inner sense of pride, let's now begin to talk about how we mobilize, how we strategize. And then you started to talk about us coming together. And a really interesting example you raised actually is, according to a census, according to the amount of people within a diaspora, if say, I don't know, we had 19 million people, for example, from a diaspora, and if each of them was to give, was it £1 or £10, how much that would be accumulatively? Something like 19 million or something you'd sort of said in the book. And then with that with those funds, we can then start projects of our own. So could you elaborate a little bit on that for us? Because that was really interesting and made so much sense.
Well, it's about understanding the power of our own economics, our own economic power.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have money. As a race, we have money because we go and
largest
spend.
Consumers, aren't
yeah,
we?
we are the largest consumers. We go and spend on designer clothes. We go and buy big cars. We have money. So it's about bringing that money within the community and collectively.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
And then use it because I use the model, the same model as like the Nation of Islam, where they say like they call $1. You give $1, and then you can accumulate that dollar. Everyone gives the dollar, and then you can. The amount of money that you can accumulate, you can start building with that money. You can start doing your own schools. You can creating your own business. You can start, providing programs for young people. There's so many things that you could do if you just came together with your
dollar. I mean, again, you spoke about the psychology of our counterparts and them understanding us as consumers, us as spenders, and how important, as it's named, the Negro dollar was from quite some time back. And in understanding that, they were able to sustain those economies to build their economics. You spoke about that, which was really, really interesting. So then you talked about Take It Black. So could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, Take It Black, first of all, it was about I think it was in the 1950s in America. There was a documentary on the spending of the Negro. I can't remember the title of it now, but it was, what they did was they studied our spending. And so, and from the study of the spending, then they created programs in order to make us spend.
Yes.
They did that, and that was in the US. They did that, and the Take It Black for me was to say take back our own industries, particularly black hair care, which is an industry that we are the highest consumers, but we don't really own it. We don't own that industry, which is absolutely ludicrous. So I think it was worth back then about 5 billion or something here when I wrote the book. I'm not sure what it's worth now. But we are not, we're just the consumers of that. So we don't own it. So we're not rich. We're not rich from that. So we've made, and I mentioned one particular organisation. I'm not going to mention them here because I'm not going to give them any airplay. But this organisation, they've become multi-millionaires. They're an Asian organisation. They've become multi-millionaires on black women. Because we're the ones that go and buy all the hair grease, so they've earned money from us, but we don't have anything, but they're multi-millionaires, so we've helped them to build a legacy for their children.
Food as well.
Yeah, food, and
that's happened in food too.
And food as well, because usually it's like the Turkish you find, and Asian people as well, that sell Caribbean food as well. So they sell, what they do is they sell our products back to us. And they make and they laugh at us as well, because we come and buy from them, but we don't own these shops. Even if you do find some, I mean, I actually have a Caribbean shop not far from me, and I shop there, but he's just one shop. I don't know how many others there are. There aren't many. And so the Take It Black, the concept of was the Take It Black. Yeah, it was a play on words, obviously.
Yes.
Take It Black was to start by taking back our own industry. So it was the hair care, and the food. Those are the first ones we should take, because they're the things that we really own. They're ours. Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. So towards the end of the book, you then have a collection, and I don't recall step 7, where you were reviewing all of the steps and giving us a conclusion. So in concluding, what would you say in concluding Blacksterling and what it is that the messages that you actually want to convey in concluding?
In conclusion, I think, as if I can remember rightly, I was saying that review all of the steps.
Yes.
Review the steps and try to implement them in your everyday life, because they're very simple steps.
Yes.
And I even said, I always say, a 10-year-old could read that book.
Yes.
And take the steps, because it's very simple. So there's simple things that we can do every day. The steps are very simple, so review them and try to do them.
Emulate them,
Yeah, just once. I mean, there was one reader that read the book. She gave a fantastic review. I think I sent you the review of it. Yeah, her name's Princess Hannah Rebel. She done a great review. But she says that every day she uses Blacksterling to help her. Wow. Yeah. She uses it. She actually
But
uses
this
it
is
as a
it.
tool.
It's like a tool book, isn't it? And I think it is so helpful. And like you say, it's so practical in the way that you've written it. And it's very clear after each chapter. You've summarised what the next step needs to be in terms of the practical application. So it is clear. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed reading it. But I wanted to leave some time for us to talk about your new publication.